It is Friday afternoon, somewhere around 3 o'clock, and two wealthy men are taking a body down off a piece of wood. One of them is a member of the council that voted to kill him. His name is Joseph, and he comes from a town called Arimathea, and this morning he did something that could end his life. He walked into the Roman governor's residence and asked for the corpse of a convicted rebel. Men have been ruined for less. The other one is Nicodemus. He is carrying about 75 pounds of myrrh and aloes. You need to understand what that number means. That is not what you bring to a funeral. That is what you bring to a coronation or to the burial of a king. Nobody hauls that much spice up a hill for a man he intends to forget. They are working fast because the sun is going down, and when the sun goes down, the Sabbath begins, and when the Sabbath begins, the work has to stop. They have maybe 3 hours. Joseph takes the shoulders. Nicodemus wraps the linen. The body is heavier than it looks. Dead weight always is. Their good clothes are already ruined, and neither of them says very much. There is a garden nearby. In the garden there is a tomb cut into limestone, brand new, never used. It belongs to Joseph. He bought it for himself. They lay the body inside. They roll the stone across the mouth of it. And then the camera stops. That is where almost every version of this story stops. Friday closes the door, and the next thing you hear is a woman running in the dark on Sunday morning. But there are 3 days in between. You know where the body was. The body is the easy part. The body was in a rock room in a rich man's garden with a Roman seal on the door and soldiers outside who did not want to be there. That question has an answer, and everybody knows it. Here is the question almost nobody asks out loud. Where was he? And here is the part nobody tells you. While those two men were still working in the fading light, something was happening in the city below them. The ground had shaken hard enough to split rock, and all over Jerusalem graves had come open. Nobody walked out of them. Not yet. Hold on to that. We are coming back to it, and when we do, it is going to answer the whole question. Because this is not a video about the tomb. This is not a video about the stone. This is not a video about the guards or the seal or the soldiers. This is a video about a gap, a 3-day gap that the Bible flatly refuses to leave empty. There are 4 answers. They have been argued over for 2,000 years, in councils and cathedrals and commentaries. One of them collapses the moment you touch the Greek. 2 of them carry you halfway and then stall. And the last one rests on a single verb that almost every English Bible smooths flat. Let me show you where each one lands. Start with the sentence that hundreds of millions of people say out loud every Sunday morning without ever stopping to think about it. He was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended into hell. That line sits in the Apostles' Creed. It gets recited in cathedrals in Rome and in cinder block churches in Nairobi and in living rooms in Ohio. 4 words. He descended into hell. Most people who say it assume it has been there since the apostles themselves, which is what the name of the creed seems to promise. But it gets stranger. The first man we can prove wrote that line down is a scholar named Rufinus of Aquileia, a translator working in northern Italy around the year 404. He wrote a commentary explaining the creed line by line, and when he got to that phrase, he did something that most people quoting him have never actually read. He admitted it was not everywhere. Rufinus notes that this clause is not in the creed used by the church at Rome. He also notes it is not found in the churches of the East. It came from his own local church in Aquileia. That is his own commentary, written by the man defending the line. The single most famous sentence about these 3 days, the one repeated by more human beings than almost any other sentence in Christian history, entered the creed through one regional church in northern Italy. And the earliest writer to explain it tells you plainly that Rome in the East did not have it. I said that line out loud every week for years before I ever went and read Rufinus, and the afternoon I found this out was not a good one. The problem was never that it broke something. The problem was that I had been repeating a sentence with total confidence and had never once checked where it came from. That does not make it false. Rufinus believed it, and he had reasons, and we are going to look at his reasons. But it should slow you down. Because if you built your entire picture of these 3 days on that one line, You built it on a foundation that is younger and narrower than you were told. And it gets worse because of the word. Stay with me. This next part is the hinge. In Hebrew, the place where dead people go is called Sheol. It shows up around 65 times in the Old Testament, and here is what you need to know about it. Sheol is not a punishment, it is a location. Everyone goes there. Jacob expects to go there in grief. Job asks to be hidden there. The righteous go down and the wicked go down, and the word carries no fire in it at all. It means roughly the grave, the pit, the realm of the dead, the place where the story pauses. When Jewish scholars translated their scriptures into Greek, they needed a Greek word for Sheol. They chose Hades, same idea, a holding place, a realm with gates and a keeper, not a sentence, a waiting room. Now here is the other word, Gehenna. Gehenna is a completely different thing, and you can walk to it. It is a real valley on the south side of Jerusalem, the Valley of Hinnom, and it has an ugly history. Centuries before, children had been burned there in sacrifice to a foreign god. By the time of Jesus, the name had become a byword for final judgment, for fire, for the end of the road. Jesus used that word. He used it about 11 times. He was not shy about it. Pay attention to this. Not once, not a single time in the entire New Testament is Gehenna used for the place he went during those 3 days. Every text that speaks about where he was uses Hades. 2 different Greek words, 2 different realities, 1 waiting room, 1 judgment. And English took both of them and printed the same 4 letters over the top, hell. That is where 2,000 years of argument was born, not in a council, not in a heresy, in a translation choice. Millions of people pictured Jesus descending into flames because a word got flattened somewhere between Greek and the language you happen to speak. So if it was not fire, what was it? What kind of place is a waiting room for the dead? Jesus himself painted the picture, and it is bleaker than most people remember. He told a story about a rich man and a beggar named Lazarus. Both of them die, and in the story, the beggar is carried to a place of comfort described as Abraham's side. The rich man is in torment, and between the two of them, there is a great chasm fixed. And the point of the chasm is that it holds. It holds in both directions. Whoever goes down stays down, and whatever they learn down there stays with them. That is the world of the dead as first-century Jews understood it. 2 regions, 1 divide, and a door that only opens inward. Abraham is down there. Moses is down there. David, who wrote the Psalms you still sing, is down there. Isaiah, who described the suffering servant 700 years before there was a cross to nail him to, is down there. Every faithful person who ever waited for a promise died still waiting for it and went down into the dark, and the chasm did not move. That is the world Jesus walked into on Friday afternoon. So did he actually go there? The answer comes from Peter, and it comes in public, in front of a crowd, about 7 weeks later. Peter stands up on the day of Pentecost, with Jerusalem packed full of pilgrims, and starts quoting the 16th Psalm. And the line he pulls out is this one: "You will not abandon my soul to Hades, nor let your Holy One see corruption." Then Peter does something remarkable. He explains it. He says David was not talking about himself, because David died and was buried, and his tomb is right here in this city. You can go look at it. David was talking about the Messiah. So the very first Christian sermon ever preached says, out loud, that the soul of Jesus went into Hades. But look closely at the verb Peter chose, abandon, left behind. That is the language of a place somebody walked out of, and every word in the line is about the leaving, which means he went in, and he came out. And that raises the only question left worth asking. What was he doing in between? From here, the ground gets softer, so let me lock down what we actually know. 2 things are solid. His soul was in Hades, and he did not stay. Everything past that line is argument. Good argument, ancient argument, argument made by brilliant people who love this book. But argument. If this is the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe. It actually helps this channel reach people who are asking the same questions and finding nothing but slogans. And before we go on, tell me something. Before today, What did you think happened during those 3 days? Say it in the comments before we go any further. I want to see the split. Because there are 4 answers. One of them is about to collapse. 2 will get you most of the way. And the one still standing at the end is not the one you were taught. Answer 1. He went down there to keep suffering. This one had real weight in the medieval church, and it still shows up in sermons today. The idea runs like this. The cross paid the physical price. The 3 days paid the spiritual one. He absorbed the full punishment of the damned in the place of the damned, and only after that was the debt cleared. It is a serious idea, and people I respect hold it, and it dies on 2 sentences. The first one he said himself, from the cross in Greek, tetelestai, translated as, "it is finished." That word shows up on ancient business documents, stamped across a bill, paid in full, nothing outstanding. If the payment was still being made on Saturday, then Friday's word was not true. The second sentence is even harder to get around, and he said it to a dying criminal hanging next to him. Today you will be with me in paradise. Today, not in 3 days, not after the fire, today. Whatever he was doing on Saturday, he was doing it with a thief beside him. That is not the itinerary of a man serving a sentence. Answer 2. He went down there to empty the place out. This one is old, and it is beautiful, and it has a name. In English, it is called the harrowing of Hades. Harrowing in the farming sense, dragging a blade through packed ground and turning everything over. The picture is this. Every faithful person who died before the cross was waiting on the far side of that chasm. Abraham, Moses, Isaiah, the widow who fed Elijah, the prophets who died for a promise they never got to see. And on Saturday, the door of that place comes off its hinges and he walks in, and he brings them out with him. There is a real text underneath it. Paul writes to the Ephesians that when he ascended on high, he led a host of captives. And Paul adds that before he went up, he had first gone down into the lower regions of the earth. And this is where it gets remarkable. Christians were saying this out loud almost immediately. Ignatius of Antioch, writing around the year 107, while Roman soldiers marched him toward his own execution, says the prophets were waiting for him, and that when he came, he raised them. Around the year 165, a bishop named Melito of Sardis preached an Easter sermon, the oldest one that still survives, describing Christ walking into the realm of the dead the way a man walks into a house he owns. So the belief is early, very early. Here is the honest part. The version most people picture, bronze gates exploding, Satan and Hades arguing with each other in panic, Adam pulled up by the wrist, does not come from the Bible. It comes from a document called the Gospel of Nicodemus, sometimes called the Acts of Pilate, and it was written around the 4th century. It is not scripture. No church council ever put it in the canon. That does not automatically make the idea wrong. But it means that when you picture those gates coming down, you are picturing a scene written 300 years after the fact by an author whose name nobody knows. So answer 2 holds on one end and dangles on the other. Paul gives you the captives. A 4th century author gives you everything else. Answer 3, he went straight to paradise. This is the Protestant answer, and it leans hard on that promise to the thief. Look at the word he used, paradisos. It is a loan word from Persian, and it does not mean a cloud. It means a walled garden belonging to a king, an enclosed place, guarded, planted, somewhere a gardener actually works. Then look at his last words, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. He does not say, into the darkness. He does not say, into the pit. He hands his spirit to his Father, like a man setting something down in safe hands. John Calvin went further than anyone. He argued the descent into hell was not a place at all, that it happened on the cross itself, in the hours of darkness, when Jesus cried out asking why God had abandoned him. That cry, said Calvin, was the descent. The hell was the forsaking. It is a powerful reading, and it has one problem it cannot fully solve. Peter still stood up at Pentecost and said his soul was not abandoned to Hades. You do not need to say that about a man who was never there. Calvin solved the cross. He did not quite solve Pentecost. This is the one I held longest, and I gave it up slowly and with bad grace, because answer 3 is clean and it lets you skip the whole uncomfortable business of the underworld. What moved me in the end was going back and rereading the chasm. Because if paradise is the far side of that divide, the comfortable side, Abraham's side, then it is a room in the same house. The thief, the promise, and Peter's line about Hades all land in the same afternoon, and each one leaves the others standing. Answer 4. He went down there to make an announcement. And this one turns on a single Greek verb that almost every English Bible smooths over. Peter writes that he went and preached to the spirits in prison. The English word preached makes you imagine an altar call in the dark, a last offer, one more chance. That is not the word. The word is ekarixin. It comes from charisso, and a charix was a herald, the man who walked into a public square with a trumpet and read out what the king had already decided. He came to deliver a verdict that was already law. Greek has a separate word for offering good news and inviting an answer back. Peter reached straight past it and took this one instead. Now put that next to what Paul told the Colossians. He disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame, leading them in a triumphal procession. Any Roman reading that saw it instantly, because they had watched it happen in the streets. A victorious general parading through the city with the defeated march behind him in chains, in public, so everyone could see who lost. He did not go down there to suffer. He did not go down there to bargain. He did not go down there to hide. He went down there to announce that it was over. And before we go to the last piece, one caution from someone with more authority than me. Augustine spent a long letter wrestling with that verse in Peter, turning it over, testing it, and then admitted the passage was too difficult for him to settle. If Augustine held it loosely, so should we. But there is one more line, and that line settles more than any of the four. Years later, an old man is exiled on a rock in the Aegean, and he sees something that knocks him flat on his face. And the figure standing over him says this, "I am the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I hold the keys of death and of Hades." Now watch what happens next. He is holding keys. Keys do not appear in a man's hand. Keys belong to somebody. Somebody was the keeper of that place. Somebody held the authority to open it and shut it. And at some point between Friday afternoon and Sunday morning, that authority changed hands. Scripture never films the moment. We are not given the room or the confrontation or the sound the gate made. We are only shown the aftermath. One man walking out into daylight with the keys of the dead in his fist, and no explanation of how he got them, because the fact that he has them is the explanation. And that brings us back to the graves. Remember, at the very beginning, when the ground split open, Matthew is the only one who records it, and he records it in a way that has bothered careful readers for 18 centuries. He writes that as Jesus died, the earth shook, the rocks were split, the tombs were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. Then he adds one clause, and that clause is the strangest sentence in the whole Passion narrative. They came out of the tombs after his resurrection. Read it again slowly. The tombs open on Friday. The people come out on Sunday, which means that for those 3 days, there were graves standing open all over Jerusalem, cracked, unsealed, empty of stone, but not yet empty of the dead. Doors ajar in the hillsides above a city keeping Sabbath, and nothing coming out of any of them, waiting. Matthew leaves it there. 2 verses, and then he moves on to the centurion. Those people get no names and no destination, and the strangest detail in the chapter just sits in the text, unexplained. Scholars have argued about that silence for centuries, but look at the shape of it. The doors open when he dies. Nobody walks through them until he walks through his, because nobody comes out of the grave ahead of him. That is Matthew's answer to the entire question of this video, and he gives it without a single word of commentary. Not a theory about Hades, not a diagram of the underworld, just a 3-day delay, sitting there in the text, telling you that death did not become a door for anybody until he went through it first and left it standing open behind him. And there was one more thing torn that afternoon. The historian Josephus described the veil that hung in the temple, a Babylonian curtain of blue and scarlet and purple and fine linen, and by his measurements, it stood roughly as tall as a 9-story building. That was the barrier across the Holy of Holies, the sign that said this far and no further. Matthew says it tore, and he tells you which direction, from the top to the bottom. Nobody reaches the top of a 9-story curtain. That tear did not start with human hands. It started high and came down, which tells you who did it and which way he was moving. You have lived through a Saturday, maybe not that one, but you know the shape of it. The phone call came at 2 in the morning, and the funeral is not until Thursday. The scan came back, and the appointment with the specialist is 11 days out. The marriage ended in a sentence, and the paperwork will take a year. The worst thing already happened, and the next thing has not started, and you are stuck in the middle with nothing to do but get through the hours. The church has a name for that day: Holy Saturday. It is the one day in the entire year with no communion, no celebration, no service in many traditions at all. The altar is stripped bare, the candles are out. It is the day the church deliberately sits in the silence and does not pretend. You think the middle is where God is absent. You think the silence means nothing is happening, that heaven went quiet because heaven has nothing to say to you right now. That is exactly backwards. The one day the universe looked most abandoned is the day he was deepest into the dark, taking a set of keys off the one thing you are most afraid of. He was not gone. He was down there, under the floor of the worst thing that ever happened, doing the work that made Sunday possible. There is no basement you can fall into that he has not already stood in. He did not go around death. He went through it, and he left the door open. So let me leave you with 3 things. First, strip away every painting and every hymn and every 4th century story about bronze gates, and the Bible tells you exactly 3 facts about those days. His soul was in Hades. He was not left there, and he came back holding the keys. Everything past those 3 facts is inference. Some of it is old and beautiful inference, held by people far wiser than me. But it is still inference, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you a confidence the text never gave them. Second, that line you may have said out loud every week of your life, "He descended into hell," does not mean what you were led to believe. It never said Gehenna. It said the realm of the dead. He did not go down there to burn. He went down there as a herald, and heralds only get sent after the war is already won. Third, and this is the one I would keep if you forget the rest, he got there first. Whatever grave you are standing next to right now, whatever room you cannot see the far side of, whatever Saturday you are living in this week, he has already been in the dark underneath it, and he did not come back empty-handed. He came back with the keys. Which of the 4 answers did you grow up believing? And did anything today move you off it? Tell me in the comments. I read them, and this one I actually want to know. If this was worth your time, subscribe. There is more of this coming. One last thing. The stone in front of that tomb on Sunday morning did not get rolled away so he could get out. He was already gone. It got rolled away so you could look inside.